The holding cost is a risk. It's a significant one. It's safer. It's just better to do it that way than to hold on for your profit.
Welcome to the Ideal Investor Show. This is the podcast where we help you challenge your mindset and discover where you are. Let's go. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Ideal Investor Show, where we bring you great guests who have great stories to tell and great services to offer. And today we have another one of those great guests, and that is Kevin Amolsch, or Amolsch, if you want to Americanize it. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Axel, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to do this with you today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that you made the time and that we figured it out, because for the audience, we've been trying for a little while to make this work. And
it's been interesting.
No longer upside down and everything, so really good to go. So before we dive in a little further, Kevin, tell the audience, how did you end up doing what you're doing right now?
Yeah, Axel, thank you so much for having me on the show. Like I said, I'm super happy to be here. So I got investing pretty young. I was only 21 years old when I bought my first one. Lived in it for 2 years, moved out of it, and threw a tenant in there. I say it like that was easy. It was not easy at all. But what I learned was, you have appreciation, you have your loan getting paid down, you have your cash flow. Real estate can make you wealthy. So I started focusing in on real estate, and I fell in love with the financing side of it. What I learned going through this process, I was buying one house or two houses a month, and while I was in school, because I was able to negotiate owner carry type transactions. And what I learned was everything that has to do with a real estate deal, the contract and the closing, comes down to the money, the financing. It's how you structure it. So I love structuring deals. So I started focusing in on the financing, started raising private capital and lending it out to other real estate investors. And I started Pine Financial in 2008. And here I am now.
Yeah, that's very cool. Now, when I ask people, oftentimes towards the end of the show, like, tell me, most influential book or stuff that you read, many people say Rich Dad, Poor Dad. So
Yeah.
because of what you just said, are you the son of Rich Dad, or how did you buy a house at 21?
That's so funny. And in fact, it was Rich Dad, Poor Dad. We call that the Purple Bible. I was reading that while I was in the military.
Oh, okay.
And other books, right? But all of them were saying, hey, if you have this money sitting in a savings account, which wasn't very much, it's not like I was getting paid a lot, but I didn't have any expenses.
Right.
So where do I focus my investments with this little bit of capital that I have? And Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and many others said real estate. So maybe I'm not the son, but I was influenced.
Yeah. Okay. You're a student then. So I'm assuming we're talking VA loan, right?
I have never used the VA loan.
Really? Even not for the first one?
No, the first one was an FHA, had better terms, and I had the 3.5% to put down.
Oh, okay.
And then from there, I didn't put money down on a house again until, within the last 5 years, probably. I was doing everything
with enough equity, then probably don't need to really, Yeah, no, that's that's really cool and interesting. So I had to do that one, So
yeah.
Okay, cool. Now, tell the audience a little bit, what are you doing mainly now? Who are your clients? Who are your lenders? And a little bit of how this all works at Pine.
Yeah, I'm having an absolute blast. I gotta tell you, I really love real estate and I love this business. So we help passive and active investors. So we're really sandwiching ourselves between the two. So it's a win-win-win business that I'm in. I help passive investors by bringing in private capital and putting it into a mortgage fund. We have a couple of them. One of them is a public fund. So that's a whole story, how you get that approved with the SEC and how you navigate all the regulations around publicly offering a security to non-accredited investors. So that's been a learning and a fun process. And then on the lending side, we help small mom and pop real estate investors. So think about your fix and flip television shows. Like, we're the money behind those transactions. So our typical client does one to five deals a year, fix and flips.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, you already mentioned non-accredited. So what would be kind of like the lowest and the more average investment into a fund like that?
Yeah, so it's called a Reg A, and it's a regulation A under the SEC, and they allow for an unlimited number of non-accredited investors. Now you have to meet certain thresholds. You can't invest more than 10% of your net worth. And then us as a company, we have to have audited financials, twice a year reporting. There's quite a lot that goes into it, but the minimum investment for that particular fund is $10,000.
Okay. So that's way away from like syndications that typically start at 50 or 75 or sometimes even 100, and they most of the time need to be, at least the vast majority needs to be accredited. Okay, and
Correct.
then what would you say is kind of like the average, what most of your investors do?
Well, we have a lot of accredited investors also, so that's a different fund that we use them. That's a 506c, which is going to be most used in this industry, and most of your syndications you'll see as a 506c. And all that means is you can market the investment, but you only can accept accredited investors,
Right.
right? But it's a little easier to navigate with the SEC in that arrangement. So we have both. Now our accredited investors, they share in some of the upside, so the returns are a little bit higher. And if you combine all of them, to answer your question, we're a little over $100,000 average investment, but anywhere from 10,000, and we have some that are 8, 9, $10 million investors. So it's quite the range.
Okay, yeah, very cool. Now, one thing, and you mentioned the TV shows that have been
Yeah.
there, and I agree that it would be nice if they would put a little bit more emphasis of where's the money actually coming from. For especially, like you can imagine when you know some of the more famous people, that the frequency of deals that they're going through, it would make sense that they can use the equity that they gain after the sale to reapply it to the next deal. But what I'm kind of curious in this context from this investor, let's say there is somebody who says, okay, I like what I hear, I put 30,000 in because I have that. How would that look like for them if you were to describe like a year with Kevin and my $30,000?
Yeah. So if you're in our Reg A, that's probably where you would go with that type of investment. It's a very, very simple, very boring Axel investment. It's an 8% annualized return paid out every month. So it's going to be, this is more on the conservative side of your investment portfolio. You're not going to get your 12, 13, 15% IRRs that you do with a syndication, but you're going to get cash flow each and every month, and it's liquid. So if you want your money back, you get it back.
Right. So that's basically the comparison to somebody saying, okay, I have the 30 grand, I can buy $150,000 turnkey property, let them manage it. And do I get more? Probably not, unless you take the tax benefits and depreciation,
Right.
that kind of stuff on top of it. But then you also still have to look after it, even if it's managed by someone, and you can't quickly get it back unless you happen to buy it in, what was that, like middle of 2021, and it increased in by 30,000 a month.
Yeah, exactly.
But that was probably once in a lifetime, at least. I hadn't seen it before or after. Okay, cool. So it's basically you acting like a bank with much better interest. Is that fair?
Yeah, exactly. And it's not, well, let me clarify this, because the answer to the question is yes, with a caveat. We're not a bank. So it's not like I have money just sitting in an FDIC insured account and you ask for it back, I give it back. We have our money invested into real estate loans, right? So it's liquid because we have so many loans going out and coming in, going out, coming in every month. That creates the liquidity, but we don't have the money sitting in the bank account. So there will be a delay from the redemption requests to when you actually get the money back. You're probably looking at 30 days. The documents give us 90, although that's super rare for us to go that long. So think about it. If you want your money back, you better budget 30 to 90 days. It's not instant. That would be the
Right.
difference.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, just for revealing a little secret that I've written often about, literally that actually happens in every bank. It's just that they don't make you wait because of volume and turnover and so forth. But as soon as you give it to them, it's not your money anymore. And they don't let it sit around either. They immediately lend it out for more than what they give you. Right. And theoretically, if you walk in, I mean, I always use this as an example, right? You walk in and say, I need 10 grand cash and I have 100 in my savings account. They can say, no, sorry, we don't have that. We need to first go and find some place where we have that money, because you're not entitled, right? You gave them a loan. That's what you sign for when you open your account. And there are maybe not 30 days or maybe not 90 days, but it's not like they have to keep it in the safe or anything like that. There's a lot of
Oh,
big misconception about that. So I just want to clarify that, because a lot of people think it's their money when it sits in a checking account or savings account, and that's just really not the case. So
yeah.
now when you look at the other side, for the people that you're helping, and I'm a little bit honestly more interested in that, we obviously have a huge shortage of shelter, so to speak, of housing. How is that market going? How these fix and flip people that you're working with, can you talk a little bit about the prices, the turnaround, the ability to sell with these high interest rates? Because I'm assuming they're trying to sell to somebody who's just going to get a regular mortgage right now, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. These are mostly starter homes.
Yeah.
So in the markets we work in, I'll just share that with you. It's Denver and up and down the Front Range in Colorado. Let's say that.
Yeah.
We're in the Twin Cities in Minnesota. We do some work in DC and a little bit in Wisconsin. Now, Wisconsin's a strange one because the median price is so much lower than those other three markets I mentioned. But if you think about Denver, Minneapolis, and DC, those are pretty high priced, high dollar markets. So we're seeing starter homes at like $500,000, right? So, but yes, the answer to your question is most buyers of the properties that we're loaning on are first-time home buyers, and they are rate sensitive.
Yeah, absolutely. So how often, I guess in that context, how often does it happen that one of those fix and flip people that got the money from you have to extend?
Yeah, it's interesting because I've been doing this since 2006. I started Pine in 2008, as I mentioned, and I haven't seen the extension requests or the need for extensions quite like I'm seeing right now. And I think it's because people's expectations were set with those super low interest rates and houses flying off the market. Now, you mentioned 2021 when we were seeing double-digit returns, like actually it was multiple years in a row of 13, 14% returns, which is unheard of. And you list a property and within 2 days it sold for more than you listed it at, right? It was very, very crazy. And you had 3% mortgages back then also. So people sort of got used to that, I think. And then as the interest rates started to go up, and I was going to use the word creep up, they didn't creep up at all. I mean, the attack on the interest rates by the Fed was unlike anything we've seen in history. It went up higher, faster than ever, even back in the 80s, if you look at it from where they started at. So I think that was a shock to the economy and especially expectations, buyer expectations, and they did not align with seller expectations. It took them longer to catch up. So houses were sitting on the market, and yes, we were getting extension requests. I don't have the statistics, Axel, but I would say it's probably 15 to 20%, if I was to guess, of our loans are needing extensions at this point. But look, houses are still selling. You just have to have your expectations appropriately set and price the property correctly, and then it sells.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the audience, just to realize, if you, and Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I think the way I would summarize it is if somebody buys a property for, let's say, 350 because it's really in a serious need of help, and they put 100,000 of help in there. So now it's basically 450, and they got those 100,000 and maybe more from you. And now they want to sell it for 500, just to use your number there as an example. If the carrying cost is something like $4,000 or $5,000 a month, right? Yes, they can maybe ask you for an extension for a month and pay you another $5,000. So now if they sell it for their 500 they wanted to, they're really only making 45, right? If they ask another month extension, they're making 40. And it's basically a foregone conclusion that they ultimately have to say, well, maybe I have to sell it for 475, just make a little bit, get out of here, then ultimately not even break even or make anything, right? And I think that's illustrating what you said, right? If everything is in the 450 to 500 and you want 500, you have probably a limited market, besides the fact that if somebody, going back to your own example, let's say can put 5% down because it's their first home, right? So that's 25,000 down, but then you have a $475,000 mortgage at 6 or 7%. That's a pretty steep monthly thing to pay, right? And so those are all the different, quick math for people that do this all the time. I see you nodding, so you're doing it all the time too. But for the audience, just, if you ever jump on Google and plug that into a calculator, you will see those are pretty substantial numbers. And when uncertainty is around, and I think we're living right now in a phase of uncertainty, people think about it more than they used to, if they really want to make that kind of a commitment. Hey, let's take a quick break for a message from our sponsors. If you're serious about growing your wealth, you know the best opportunities aren't always the most obvious. That's why we've partnered with Bob Bernodas of Franchise with Bob. He specializes in helping investors like you leverage franchising an overlooked but highly profitable way to create semi-passive income. And for a limited time, Bob is giving our listeners access to his course on franchise investing for free. Inside, you'll learn how to evaluate franchises, minimize risk, and maximize your returns. This course is normally sold for $499, so don't miss out and claim your free course now at edu.franchisewithbob.com/ideal. So that plays a role as well. But the dynamic is that the mom and pop fix and flip organization, or even if it's a mid-size, it wouldn't make sense to wait very long or ask for many extensions, because sooner or later you just run out of equity.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's more to it than that. All of that is true. I'm 100% in agreement. And look, you have mass deportations right now. This is all part of the political climate. And I'm not going political. I'm just saying what is happening.
Yeah.
And that's making it difficult for fix and flippers, because a lot of the people that are getting deported or are afraid to get deported are in the construction industry. So our pool of labor is shrinking significantly. So it's a little bit tougher to get projects done as quickly. I mean, I have clients that are telling me they're only coming in working on evenings and weekends, right? So now how much does that slow the project down?
Right.
Costs have gone up. So if you're underwriting deals at a certain number and now you have these tariffs or whatever is happening with lumber or steel, and then all of a sudden your construction numbers are different. So there's a lot that goes into this business. But to your point, the holding costs is a risk. It's a significant one. And you want to get in and out of these as quickly as possible. It is far better to not lose money, but it's far better to make less money and move on to a new project and keep that velocity of capital moving. It's safer. It's just better to do it that way than to hold on for your profit. And this goes back to my comment about the expectations. As fix and flippers, we need to lower our expectations on the exit. Even though there's interest rate acceptance at this point, I'm confident saying that, our sellers are still have these wild expectations. It's bizarre.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you. And I mean, you mentioned DC. I think there's probably a high level of uncertainty because a lot of people are either directly or indirectly related to government jobs, and nobody knows how many of those will continue to stay around in, let's say, this year. Just, I don't know how long it's going to take. And I'm not against cleaning up. I think it's highly necessary. But still, it's going to probably affect quite a few people. And I know they're not all in DC, but that is probably one of the more affected areas in this overall picture. So the other quick thing I want to just make sure, since we also have, we like ourselves to be seen as educators, the sheer fact that the Fed increased in an unprecedentedly fast and strong way the federal interest rates, or the Fed rates, that's really just an interest rate between banks for very, very short-term loans. I think the other component, just, to touch a little on that educational thing, is that in that same period of time, before and even after, the debt increase was just insane, which also means the bonds, the 10-year especially, that is basically the basis for mortgage, not really the bank exchange rate is the basis for mortgage. And that just kept going up. And it is also, in my opinion, the reason that it's still relatively high, because we have $36 trillion in debt, and you need to find people who are willing to take that risk, so to speak, right? And they want to be reasonably compensated. So I'm really not a big fan of people constantly looking at what Jay Powell says and what the bank exchange rate change is going to be. Yes, there is a correlation, but it's not as strong as the media makes it sound like. If that goes down by 0.5%, then we can all expect the mortgage rates to go down. No,
Right.
we're making $2 trillion a year in new debt, and the Chinese don't want it anymore. The Japanese can't afford it anymore. Right. And with the tariffs now happening, who knows what the Europeans are going to say? Most people don't realize Belgium is the third largest lender to the United States, which is because Brussels is the seat of the EU, which is in Belgium. Right. So those are little additional things to be aware when people say, well, when is it going to come down? There is a scenario there where the Fed exchange rate could come down another percent and mortgages still don't move.
Yeah. In fact, I called it before the last cut. I thought mortgage rates were going to go up after a cut. And that's exactly what happens. There's two things at play. You mentioned the one, which is the 10-year, and the supply and demand, the way it pulls and pushes the price on that. And then the price of the 10-year, of course, affects the yield. But the other thing is the not the yield on the 10-year, but the spread, the yield spread between the 10-year and the 30.
Right.
That's pretty high right now.
Right.
And that's a compensation. That's the market pricing in what the mortgages should be, is all that is. So the market's saying, hey, this 10-year has a little bit of risk, or these mortgages have a little bit of risk over the 10-year. So now I need a higher interest rate. The 10-year we consider the long-term risk-free rate. Right. It's so funny. I don't know why I'm going to go off on this tangent, but we're talking about educating the listener here. Look, Silicon Valley went down investing in the safest investment in the world, we're told. Right. They invested in 10-year treasuries, which you cannot lose money on there. They're backed by the government, by the US government. But here's what people are missing. You have to hold that treasury for the full 10-year to get that return you're expecting. Yeah. If for some reason you have to sell and liquidate to meet withdrawal demand, then you're selling it at a much higher interest rate environment than where you locked in your 10-year. So for someone to get the 6% return that they can go out and get, well, they're 4.5 now. So let's use actual numbers to get the 4.5% now. And I have a 0.5% 10-year. What does that do to the value? Right? I have to bring my value way, way down to get someone interested in buying it at the 0.5% coupon. So that's what happened to Silicon Valley. They were dumping treasuries, the safest investment in the world, into the market at a higher interest rate environment at discounted rates, and they were taking tremendous losses, and they folded.
Yeah.
Right, so let's just be careful when we think we're investing in something that's safe.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. Besides the fact that it's never been right that they were allowed not to actually every year take the true value of their reserves into account rather than whatever kind of face value is there. The other part, since we're discussing a little bit like for slightly advanced listeners on all these variables, is when you brought up the point of risk, Kevin, if you look, what's the difference really between a 2-year and a 10-year? Any kind of a reasonably sane person would say, why am I committing myself to 8 more years when I barely make any more than I make in the 2-year? Right? That's the other reality that we have, that short-term rates are so close to 10-year rates right now that, anybody, if you came to me and say, hey, I can get this interest rates for 2 years now, I don't know if I can get it again in 2 years from now, but you get it now and then you can reevaluate versus committing for 10 years and who knows what's going to be in 10 years and you have to wait until it's done, like you said, right? So there are all these different things that are somewhat unusual, and everybody needs to demonstrate flexibility in the market to make the best out of it, which I want to use as a little bridge to say, describe for us real quick for our audience. They have, hopefully, I'm at least convinced, seen that you are very experienced, your stuff, what you're doing, you give an opportunity in a market that is probably not that well known to people. So what does somebody have to do to get in touch? What would be the first few steps that would happen when they get in touch?
Yeah. So first, we talked a little bit about the economy and the markets, and I really do love that because I think it impacts our investment decisions. So I follow the market, and what I've learned was the 2008 crash was an anomaly, right? And so many people compare what we're going through now or what we've recently been through to 2008, which it doesn't compare at all. But if you look at different recessions, you will typically see housing values either stay pretty flat or go up during a recession. It's rare to see the housing go down during a recession, which probably is going to surprise some of your listeners. But in 1990, coming out of the 80s and the hyperinflation, that's the recession that hit housing that most resembles what we're going through today. So I wrote a report that describes that crash compared to exactly what I'm seeing in the market right now and comparing them so that we could try, I'm not going to say predict, but we could try to understand what is possibly coming in the future so we can be smart about our investment decisions. So I can give that report array to your listener for free. It's at thepinereport.com, thepinereport.com. So that would be a one way to get a hold of us. Otherwise, it's just pinefinancialgroup.com. We would love to chat. We love real estate. We love real estate debt. If there's anything we could do to help, we'd be very interested.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing to kind of put maybe the cherry on the icing of that cake that you just described, Kevin, is if anybody listening to us, if you just go in and look at, again, forget about all the predictions of the last few years and look between 2020 and 2025, what has actually happened to basically home real estate or residential real estate prices. And you will find, yes, they didn't go up the same every year, but there's not one year yet where they didn't go up. Right. And this is on average throughout the whole country. Now you can go one level further down and say, okay, how is that in my state and how is my state different or my area of interest for investing different than the whole country? But the interesting thing, in my opinion, is to the question of when should I get in, when should I get in touch with Kevin, when should I contact Axel for the mentoring program to have somebody who guides me through this. The old saying, we are back to that old saying in real estate that to the answer to the question, what's the best time to get started? The real answer is 25 years ago.
Yeah.
But the second best answer is basically today, because even through this insane interest rate increase, through the insane selling pressure that was up in 2020, 2021, and all these other changes that we have lived through the last 5 years, the one thing that is basically not been coming down is the prices of the properties. And ultimately,
and we were told this whole time, Axel, that we're heading into a recession.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That's what the media keeps telling us. And so we're holding off, we're not getting in, and now look what happened.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's why I'm saying, if you look at it from an investment perspective, whether you want to be an appreciation investor or like my specialty is basically a cash flow investor, either way, the second best time in your lifetime to start is now. And so I want to encourage everybody, get in touch with Kevin, and we put all the contact information and the report and stuff in the show notes, or get in touch with me and say, hey, I like this Kevin guy, but I couldn't find the link, and then I give it to you. So that's that for today. Now, independent of all that real estate stuff, I want to ask you, Kevin, if you could meet anybody, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
If I can meet anybody, wow, that's a one that I have not. I've been on a lot of podcasts, Axel. No one's ever asked me that one. I want to go to Kiyosaki because he's had such an impact in my life. See, I didn't just stop at the Rich Dad. I did all of his stuff.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And then I bought the games, and now I'm playing the games with my kids.
Yeah.
Although I don't know if I'd get along with him so well. He's kind of arrogant. I guess I would have to go with that because you're putting me on the spot. But
Yeah.
I mean, a Buffett would be great. I mean, there's a lot of names out there that I could throw, but I would think Kiyosaki would probably be my answer.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been thinking about this because even though I'm never asked that, but I'm obviously always wondering a little bit what would I say. One suggestion, if you were to tell me this, like for real, I would say, Kevin, maybe you want to meet his wife.
You want to meet my wife?
No, Kiyosaki's wife.
Oh, Kiyosaki's wife. Yeah.
See, so many people on this show, when I asked them, have said for all kinds of reasons they want to meet Elon. I'm now pretty convinced, even though I used to say this, I want to actually meet his, I don't know, that's the wrong word, secretary or like assistant or whatever, the person that makes all the stuff he does basically happen and coordinates it.
Oh yeah, that's very interesting. I like how you did that. You went a little step beyond the person who, because they share their knowledge publicly anyway. So what would you learn? Yeah, and I'm trying to build that with Pine. I'm really focused on hiring people that are smarter than me.
Yeah.
Like, where can you take this that I wasn't able to?
Yeah, but with Elon, I don't know if that's that easy, but
Yeah,
for
that's
me,
so easy.
for me,
With
it
me,
would be
pretty
super
easy.
easy.
Oh, that's
Okay,
funny.
Kevin, it was awesome to have you on the show. Any last time to tell people how they can get in touch?
Yep. You can reach me. The best way is right on our website. It's pinefinancialgroup.com. If you want to, you could email me. I do respond to my own emails. Calling me, you're probably not going to get me, but email would be great. Kevin@pinefinancialgroup.com.
Okay, Kevin, thank you so much for being on the show.
Axel, thank you so much. It was a great time.